Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down.
Hello there, everybody. How you doing? Okay, so we're here basically going over Judge Sukowitz's decision. At this point, most of you have probably already seen Tracy's video regarding this. So, she probably went over it in a great deal of depth, and she pointed out that she felt that, I know she's been pointing out that she feels that Judge Sukowitz was basically kind of connecting dots and making assumptions on her own instead of having a hearing like she should have and finding fact. She's basically replacing it with her own reasoning instead of fact. So that's one of Tracy's complaints. But I'm going to go through here, and for me, the main thing here is she's basically saying Avery hasn't met his burden that Wisconsin violated statute by giving the bones back. And few of the reasons is, number one, she's saying because the bones, Leslie Eisenberg testified at trial that none of the bones in the quarry or the gravel pit were human. And because she testified that none of them were human at trial, that basically means that none of them were human. Well, it seems to me like she gave an answer of like, I could not identify them as human. Okay, which is a little more open-ended. It's not as absolute as, Judge Sukowitz would be having you believe here, I think. So, I thought that was interesting. And she's going on, and so she's basically saying because of that fact that officers in this case, no matter what they thought, it didn't matter because their individual thoughts, according to law, or according to Youngblood versus whatever, their individual thoughts don't make any difference. The point is, but the problem is with that reasoning is she's saying like this is just a couple of law enforcement, a couple of deputies from over at Calumet County that are giving these bones back. Okay, it's one deputy from Calumet County, Jeremy Hawkins, and then it's two of the three prosecutors on this case. Who would know the facts of this case? Who would know the material, every report and everything? Who would have been going over those things? Oh, yeah. The two guys, the prosecutors that were there to give back these bones, they would remember those reports that Leslie Eisenberg was writing before trial, where she was indicating that some of those bones over in the quarry and in the gravel pit were human. They would remember that. And that's probably why they had a copy of one of those reports there that day when they were looking to find out which bones they should give back to the hall box. The other thing here is that Judge Sukowitz tries to act like there's some big, huge disagreement about who these bones belong to. No, I don't think that there is. We all suspect here on the truther side that we suspect they belong to Teresa. Clearly the state suspected it because the two of the lead prosecutors in this case decided to use Leslie Eisenberg's older report and give bones back. Those particular bones back. So clearly they believed they were Teresa Hallbach's bones. I certainly don't believe they went in there to grab animal bones to offer them up as some kind of a token to the Hallbachs. I seriously don't think they did that. That would seem extremely creepy and weird. I don't know. So I don't believe that. Okay, so in my opinion, the lead prosecutors in this case have basically, by giving those bones back and using an older report of Leslie Eisenberg's prior to trial, that they believed that those bones were Teresa's. And remember, Ken Kratz wouldn't spend 20 seconds on those bones at trial. Yet, in 2011, those bones were being sought out to be given back to the hall box. So, all right, we're going to go into the first thing here real quick, the first screenshot I got for you guys. And then in order to establish that the evidence in question was apparently exculpatory, a defendant must demonstrate that the evidence possessed exculpatory value that was apparent to those who had custody of the evidence before it was destroyed. State versus Oinous. Now, it seems pretty clear that they had an idea of what that evidence was, because who did they give it to, right? So there's not a real question, but we'll go on a little bit here. So before I get to that, so it is not enough to simply allege that destroyed evidence had the possibility of being exculpatory. Evidence does not have an apparent exculpatory value if analysis of the evidence would have provided an avenue of investigation that might have led in any number of directions. Yeah, I don't think anybody's thinking about any number of directions here. I think pretty much everybody is on the same page that these bones were human, and not only that they were Teresa Halbach's bones. Otherwise, why would they have given them back? Okay? So that everybody believes that they are human bones and Teresa's bones, Zellner, the state, until it gets questioned. As soon as Zellner questions it, because they gave them back and didn't tell anybody, like they're supposed to. So when Zellner questions it, and then suddenly the state says, oh no, our opinion is those were animal bones. You're, what? Telling me that you gave animal bones to this grief-stricken family? That's the official story? Interesting. Anyway, and yes, and basically the report is going, or her decision goes along these lines, where she's just basically saying that Avery hasn't met his burden, that the state didn't violate statute here, and all that sort of stuff. But, here's one thing I want to point out. You know who wrote the statute in question? Norm Gahn, one of the prosecutors in the Avery case. And guess who was there the day they were giving bones back? Norm Gahn, right? Okay, and then suddenly, the final pages of CASO never get handed over when Jeremy Hawkins makes a report about this activity where they gave all these bones back. Okay, that never makes it over to Avery's attorneys. The ledgers that itemize and show what they did and what they gave back and all that sort of stuff, that doesn't get handed over. That all comes out recently in the last 6 months. Within the last year, that all became available and we all got to check it out. And that's when we realized that these bones that they were giving back were all bones that Leslie Eisenberg had deemed prior to trial to be human, or possibly human, in the case of the pelvic bone. So, to me, it's pretty obvious that the prosecutors in this case who were present the day they were, in fact, there was 2 of them out of the 3 people that were there. 2 of them were prosecutors of prosecuted Stephen Avery's case, and they were there going over what was going to be given back. I mean, do we seriously believe that they were there getting animal bones to give back to the Halbachs? I mean, do we believe that? I don't. I certainly don't. I think they were there because they knew those bones were Teresa's, and that they wanted to give those bones back to the Halbachs, because they felt like it was the right thing to do, or whatever it is that they convinced themselves of, right? But the fact is they violated statute. And for me, it's clear that, with Norm Gahn being there, the guy who wrote the statute, and then suddenly none of the reports and nothing gets turned over to the other side. Nothing, nobody notifies Avery or his attorneys about this evidence that's going to be given back. And it is biological evidence. And it's clearly believed to be Teresa's, because otherwise they wouldn't be giving it back to the Halbach family. It's not animal bones, folks. Or at least they don't believe it's animal bones. That's not what they believe. That is absolutely disingenuous claim on their part. So, all right, let's go ahead and move into the next clip. Nothing of record indicates that in 2011, when the material was given back to the Halbach family, the material was reclassified as human bone. So what she's talking about here, let me just briefly explain. What she's been going through here in this decision is talking about how at trial, Leslie Eisenberg, the forensic anthropologist, deemed that she could not determine that any of the bones in the quarry or the gravel pit were human bone. But the way she words it, it's one of those things like, but she can't rule it out, right? It's so it's one of those types of things, right? So, but what Judge Angie's going with here is basically saying that at trial, Dr. Eisenberg said that she couldn't, identify those bones as human at trial. So that negates, in Judge Angie's mind, any reports she wrote previous to that in which she had classified some of those bones as human. So that's what she's saying here. So she's saying, basically at trial, Leslie Eisenberg classified those bones as not human. Okay, when I would say she was basically saying she couldn't. I would say she was more saying that she couldn't make the determination, which to me is more of an open-ended thing, right? Anyway, the law enforcement officers and attorneys involved in the release of the evidence used a prior written report of Dr. Eisenberg. So there she goes, acknowledging the fact that Dr. Eisenberg had written reports in which she had indicated she believed some of these bones to be human, right? Written before her testimony under oath to select what material would be given to the Halbach family. Okay? You're giving bones back to the victim's family, the Halbach family. And you're using a report from before trial when Dr. Eisenberg was classifying some of these bones as human. Interesting. Just saying. Dr. Eisenberg clarified her opinion in her trial testimony and confirmed that none of the material found in the quarry could be identified as human bone fragments. That means it couldn't be identified. It means, to me, that's an open-ended answer, personally. Furthermore, the FBI confirmed that the fragments could not be tested for DNA to confirm whether the fragments were human or identified as those of the victim. Under those circumstances, it cannot be said that the materials released from evidence would have been apparently exculpatory to anyone. There was no scientific evidence or record at the time the material was released to support that human biological material was being released or that the material was known to be the remains of the victim. Then why would you be returning it to the victim's family? This is mind-boggling. This is seriously mind-boggling. And let's just not forget people like Josh Redant, who eventually went and lawyered up because they were tired of getting badgered by the investigators in this case. Are you sure about the fire? Are you sure about that fire? Was it, are you sure you told us everything about that fire? I mean, Josh Redant is proof that they were bullying people and stuff, and I have a feeling that they probably had a little conversation with Miss Eisenberg right before trial, where they basically got her to go along with what they wanted her to do. It's what makes sense to me, because look, they're going back and using her reports from before trial to determine what bones they're going to give back to the grief-stricken family. Right? Right. Under what circumstances? What now? Are you kidding me? Is this a judge saying this? That the fact that two of the prosecutors on this case gave bones back to the family and they could be animal bones and that's fine? I mean, what? I mean, it's like Bizarro World looking at this. I mean, she's basically like, oh yeah, it's fine, they're animal bones. What? That's not fine. That is not fine. That's nowhere near fine. Right? Oh, brother. So, yeah. So, like I said, this decision's basically going on the fact that she's saying Avery didn't meet his burden because these bones aren't exculpatory, so therefore there's no base here. There's no claim here, or whatever. I mean, what more proof would it take? I mean, obviously, they were desperate to not talk about these bones at trial. That's why Kratz would only spend 20 seconds on them. That was his way of trying to diminish them after Jerry had been talking about them. And, and then they turn around and go and give those very bones back to the Halbachs. Right? I mean, so, yeah, it's pretty wild. This is just wild. I mean, I was very intrigued to read this decision. Look, I figure, I look at it this way. I think that Judge Sukowicz would have gone with the procedural bar argument or decision, but I think she realized that whole argument didn't fly well with the Court of Appeals, so she decided to take her chances on trying to deny it on its merits. And she's now saying that, yeah, it's fine. They gave the whole box animal bones. Animal bones. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. That's fine. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. The defense argues that it would be absurd for the state to release the bone fragments to the Halbach family if it didn't believe that the material released was the remains of the victim. Yeah, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. Okay. Therefore, the defendant argues the state acknowledged that the material released was apparently exculpatory. However, even if law enforcement believed that the material was human bone, their belief would not be founded in science or any final evidence produced during the investigation or trial. They would be acting on an unfounded belief rather than the reasonable belief as required by the Greenwald test. Individual belief does not transmute one form of matter into another. Nothing supports the position that the materials released were apparently exculpatory. So, let's go back here a little bit. Let's see. However, even if law enforcement believed that the material was human bone, their belief would not be founded in science, right? Here's the thing. Is the state is clearly of the opinion that these bones belong to Teresa. And keep in mind, she's saying law enforcement here. But remember, it's one sheriff from Calumet County, Jeremy Hawkins, and then you have two of the prosecutors on this case. 2 out of the 3 prosecutors. The people who prosecuted this case, okay, are there using a report from Leslie Eisenberg prior to her testimony at trial when she suddenly said she can make no determination about those bones in the quarry and gravel pit. And they're using one of her reports from before that where she was indicating human bone over there, and they picked out those bones to give back to the Halbach family. Now, what I'm saying here is that it seems like everybody pretty much agrees that those bones are Teresa's. Otherwise, why would they have been given back? But now that they're being called out on it for a potential violation of statute and a due process violation, now all of a sudden, oh, they're animal bones. Yeah, we gave them animal bones. Yeah. Oh, that's all. Yeah, we just gave them animal bones. No problem. No big deal. No harm, no foul. Right? That's like the attitude about this. Anyway, shocking. So there she's trying to say that basically Stephen doesn't meet his burden on this case because law enforcement, how does she refer to it, used individual belief or unfounded belief, which is or an individual belief instead of reasonable belief. I believe she shoots herself in the foot in this already when she refers to the fact that they were using a report from a report that Leslie Eisenberg wrote prior to her trial testimony, and that's what they were looking at to determine which bones to give back. Okay? And the 2 prosecutors on this case would have been 2 people who would have known about those documents. Okay? And would have known all about this case, and they aren't just some random law enforcement. Okay, that's what's striking me disingenuous about her, what she's saying here in her decision, is because she's trying to say this is law enforcement. It's like, no, but 2 of them are the actual, prosecutors in the case. They know this case better than most anybody would know it. I mean, they should, seeing as they were the ones prosecuting, right? So, yeah, it's just wild. This whole thing is wild. So that she's saying that it's not reasonable. I think the fact that they were using a report prior to that Leslie wrote prior to the trial, prior to the point where she started saying that none of those bones were human, that they were using a report before that, that to me tells me that they were reasoning and that it was therefore reasonable belief. That's it. For me, that's the way I see it. I mean, they were clearly reasoning by using a report from back then to determine which bones they were going to give back to the family. So, yeah. All right, let's move to the next clip.
In this matter, the defendant cannot show that the state knew of the potential exculpatory value of the evidence. Oh my God. As stated above, Dr. Eisenberg testified that the remains could not be identified as being of human origin, and the FBI confirmed that the evidence could not be tested to confirm whether the material was from a human being or were from the remains of the victim. Well, yeah, in 2007, they couldn't. Times have changed. The FBI now approves Andy rapid DNA testing. So, I don't know why she would bring up the FBI, but she did. Dr. Eisenberg also testified that the material found in the quarry tagged number 8675 was largely unburned. This does not support the defendant's argument that the victim was murdered and burned in a place other than the Avery property and placed there at a later date. Given the testimony of Dr. Eisenberg and the lack of any evidence supporting the released material being human in origin, it cannot be said that law enforcement was aware of any potentially exculpatory value of the material that they did not preserve, and they were making a conscious attempt to suppress evidence favorable to the defendant. And that's pretty much exactly what they were doing. I mean, she's describing exactly what they were doing to a T right there. It's, yeah, amazing. And the unburned bone that she's talking about, that's the pelvic bone. That's the one bone that Dr. Eisenberg in her early reports was doubtful about. It's the cleanest and most unburned bone, but she was still classifying it as possible human. Yet she was classifying other bones that were burned at the same level of calcination as the ones found in Avery's burn pit, and she was finding those, and she was deeming that those bones were human, but she couldn't say that they were Teresa's with any certainty. So that was the problem. I mean, wow. Anyway, based on the foregoing, the court finds that the defendant has failed to meet his burden to establish that Wisconsin Statute 968.205 was violated or his constitutional rights were violated under the provisions of Youngblood v. Arizona. As such, the defendant's motion is denied. And I would just say one more thing. It's obvious here. It's obvious that the state knew what they were doing here. Norm Gahn, the guy who wrote this statute, was there with Fallon, and they were using an older report from Leslie Eisenberg to pick out what were believed to be human bones. I mean, it's very obvious what's going on here. And of course, as the prosecutors in this case, they would have been well aware of Dr. Eisenberg's previous reports. Okay? Just like they were aware of what was on the Dassey computer. Okay? And held that back. Right? They're holding back things. And these things are proving to be very interesting and pointing in directions other than Avery and Brendan. You know? It's yet, obviously, with Judge Angela here, we don't have a chance. We don't have a chance with her, but that's fine. Now we're going to be back in the appellate courts. Zellner continues to, has now continued to build the record. So there's a lot to now weigh in the appellate, in the Court of Appeals. So we'll obviously have. If you guys have been listening to Tracy, you already probably know this, but what Tracy's saying is that 20 days. It'll be somewhere around 20 days from the decision made by Judge Sukowitz until the record gets sent back over to the Court of Appeals. And once it arrives at the Court of Appeals, there will be a 40-day period for Zellner to file her motion with the Court of Appeals. And so that will be the timeline now. So we're looking at, somewhere just under 60 days probably. We'll be seeing a motion from Zellner with the Court of Appeals. So that's what we got to look forward to.
So we have the denial from Judge Sukowitz. Now we get to go back to the appellate court. So the Court of Appeals, and now, like I was saying just a second ago, there's 20 days for the record to get sent back to the Court of Appeals. Upon the record arriving there, then Zellner will have 40 days to file her motion. So we're looking somewhere between probably somewhere between 50 and 60 days, I would say, pretty much. So, before, and then we'll have a motion from Zellner. There'll be a response from the state at that point, and then another reply from Zellner at the Court of Appeals. So that's what we can expect to come in basically about 2 months. So, like I said, I have serious issues with the way she said things in this decision. I'm sure Tracy had many others, many more technically legal based. But for me, just looking at Judge Sukowitz's logic on the surface here, I see huge issues. You know, her not seeing the fact that 2 of the prosecutors on this case were using an old report from Leslie Eisenberg. I mean, who else would have known about that report, right? I mean, and to try to dismiss them as like mere law enforcement. You know, there was two of the prosecuting attorneys there and 1 law enforcement officer, 1 deputy from Calumet. So I feel it's disingenuous that she's, you know, framing it that way. Yeah, I mean, I just think a lot of things that she's saying here are just kind of wow. Particularly the fact that, yeah, they gave him animal bones. That's cool. Like, that's okay with her. I mean, is it okay? I mean, it's just such a wild thing to see a judge saying that the fact that the state gave animal bones back to a grieving family just doesn't matter. So, yeah, that's pretty wild. So, I am going to be trying to get together with Tracy to do a live some point today, maybe this weekend. I'm just real busy this weekend. I got a lot of things going on, and I don't know when I'm going to find the time just yet. But hopefully her and I will be able to connect up, and maybe Travis and I. So we'll have to see. Anyways, so that's about it for this one, folks. Don't be discouraged. Really, this was a necessary step. I mean, a necessary evil, if you will, to have to go back down to this court so that it could come all back up to the Court of Appeals and join in Stephen Avery's current, case. So now it's become part of the record and part of that. And so now it moves forward with, even more weight behind it, basically. I don't feel that this is a particularly, sensible decision. It's, like I said, there's serious issues I have with its logic. I mean, some of the logic that she uses here is wild. And one of the things that Tracy's pointing out is she shouldn't be trying to use her logic at all. She shouldn't be trying to use her reasoning at all. Before she did that, she should have said, yes, we need to have an evidentiary hearing so that she could hear from the people involved and hear them explain it. Instead of reasoning and using this flawed logic, in my opinion, to try to explain this away is what it feels like, right? So, anyways, look forward to hopefully seeing me with Travis or Tracy this weekend. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Be good, folks.